The night air in Turin was cold the way December nights in Italy always are, not just cold on the skin, but cold in the bones, cold in the chest, the kind of cold that makes you pull your coat tighter and walk a little faster and think without meaning to about warmth, about home, about the people who wait for you somewhere soft and lit and safe. Cristiano Ronaldo was driving back from training when his phone rang. He almost didn't hear it over the music. He had the volume up high, he always did after a long session, letting the rhythm do what nothing else could, letting it drown out the noise inside his head, the replayed moments, the adjusted angles, the things he would do differently tomorrow. He was a man who lived in perpetual rehearsal, always refining, always recalculating, always preparing for something just beyond the horizon. The music was the only thing that gave his mind permission to rest. But he heard the ring, and he looked at the screen. And when he saw who it was, he turned the music off. It was his sister Katia. And Katia never called at this hour. He pulled over to the side of the road. He didn't know why he pulled over, some instinct, some animal understanding that whatever was coming next was not meant to be received while moving. The car sat in the darkness on the side of a road outside Turin, engine running, headlights cutting a pale path into the Italian night, and Cristiano Ronaldo pressed the phone to his ear. "Chris," she said. And in the way she said his name, just that one syllable, just that shortened version that only his family used, the version that took him back to a kitchen in Funchal, and a mother's voice calling him in from the street, in the way she said it, he knew. Before the words came, before the explanation, he knew. The world, in that moment, became very small. The car, the road, the cold air outside, the city of Turin going about its evening somewhere in the distance. All of it shrank down to nothing. There was only his sister's voice on the phone, and the news she was carrying, and the silence inside him that opened up like a hole in the ground. Their father was gone. José Diniz Aveiro had never seen his son play in a major final. He had never stood in the stands of Old Trafford or the Bernabeu or the Allianz Arena and watched with his own eyes what his boy had become. He had been a kit man at a small local club in Madeira, a man who spent his life in the background of other people's football dreams, maintaining equipment, carrying bags, living quietly at the edges of a game he loved but never mastered. He had given his son the name Ronaldo after Ronald Reagan, not because of politics, but because Reagan was his favorite actor at the time, and he was a man who chose things based on simple, honest affection rather than strategy. He had been that kind of man. Simple, honest, affectionate, deeply, quietly, consistently loving. He had also been an alcoholic, and that had complicated everything. Cristiano had spoken about his father rarely in public, and when he did, he chose his words with the particular care of a person navigating something that is simultaneously source of grief, source of love, and source of a shame he had spent years making peace with. He had said that he wished his father had been able to fight his demons. He had said that he loved him. He had said that the relationship was complicated. And then he had said nothing more because some things belong to the family, not to the camera, not to the interview, not to the story that the world wants to tell about you. But the truth, the private truth that Cristiano carried in the place where the cameras couldn't reach, was that his father's illness had been one of the defining architectures of his childhood. It had shaped the silences at the dinner table. It had shaped his mother's tiredness, the way Dolores Aveiro moved through a house with the particular exhaustion of a woman who was carrying more than any one person should have to carry. It had shaped the way young Cristiano threw himself into football with a ferocity that went beyond talent or ambition, because when he was on the pitch, there were rules. There were clear outcomes. You either scored or you didn't. You either won or you lost. The chaos of the world outside the white lines could not follow him in there. Football had been, from the very beginning, the thing he could control when everything else was uncontrollable. And now his father was gone. And Cristiano was sitting in a car on the side of a road in Italy, and for the first time in as long as he could remember, the thing he could not control was sitting right in the center of his chest, and there was nothing, no training session, no match, no record, no trophy that could do anything about it. He sat in that car for a long time. He didn't cry right away. He just sat. And outside, the Italian night continued its indifference, and somewhere across the water, on an island in the Atlantic that he had left when he was 12 years old, the family was gathering, and there was an empty space in the world that had never been there before. He started the car. He drove home. He called his mother. But here is the thing nobody knew. Here is the detail that never made it into the headlines or the tribute posts or the carefully managed public statements. Because 3 weeks before his father died, Cristiano had booked a flight to Madeira. He had cleared his schedule, something he almost never did during a season, something that required conversations with coaches and club officials and his management team. Something that cost him in terms of preparation time and competitive edge, and all the other currencies he traded in obsessively. He had done all of that because something had told him, something quiet and insistent and not entirely rational, that he needed to go home. He had sat with his father. In a small room. Just the two of them. He had held his father's hand. And his father had looked at him with eyes that were both very tired and very clear, the eyes of a man who has come to the end of a long road and is finally, perhaps for the first time, seeing it honestly. And Dennis had said something to his son that Cristiano had never repeated to anyone. Not to his sister. Not to his mother. Not to his closest friends. Whatever it was, whatever those words were, spoken quietly in that room in Madeira while the Atlantic wind moved outside the window, they were his. They were the private inheritance his father had left him. The thing that belonged only to the son. What we know is that when Cristiano left that room, he went outside and stood in the garden of his childhood home for a very long time, looking at nothing. And when he came back inside, his eyes were red. And he stayed 2 more days. And when he left to go back to Turin, he hugged his father at the door with the particular intensity of a person who suspects, somewhere beneath conscious thought, that this is the last time. 3 weeks later, the phone rang on a cold road in Italy, and Cristiano Ronaldo knew, in the deepest part of himself, that he had been given a gift he hadn't known he was receiving, the chance to say goodbye before goodbye was necessary. The chance to be there before the absence arrived. And that gift, that strange, terrible, precious gift, was the last thing his father ever gave him. To understand what Cristiano Ronaldo lost when he lost his father, you have to understand where he came from. And to understand where he came from, you have to understand Madeira. Not the Madeira of tourist brochures and flower festivals and volcanic mountain scenery, but the Madeira of the Quinta do Falcão neighborhood in Funchal, where a family of 6 lived in a house so small that the children slept in shifts, where the walls were thin and the winters damp and the sense of financial precariousness was as constant and unremarkable as the sound of the ocean. Dolores Aveiro had 4 children and a husband who struggled and a body that she pushed past exhaustion every single day because exhaustion was a luxury she couldn't afford. She cleaned. She cooked. She prayed. She worked. She is a woman who has spoken about the moments when she considered not continuing her pregnancy with Cristiano, a confession of extraordinary honesty that she has offered publicly, without shame, because she is a woman who has decided that truth is more important than image. She was poor and overwhelmed, and the pregnancy was unplanned, and she didn't know how they would manage. She went to a doctor and discussed her options. And then she didn't go through with it. And then Cristiano was born. There is something in that story that Cristiano has carried his entire life, a knowledge that his existence was not inevitable, that he arrived in the world by a margin, that the life he has lived was nearly not lived at all. Whether this has made him more grateful, more driven, more acutely aware of the preciousness of the time he has, perhaps all 3, perhaps something else entirely, something that doesn't have a clean name, it has shaped him in ways that no coach ever could. He was a skinny, restless, relentlessly energetic child with enormous ears and a ball that was almost always at his feet. He talked too much and moved too constantly, and the neighbors found him exhausting in the affectionate way that neighborhoods always find their most electric children exhausting. He loved his mother with a ferocity that was almost alarming, the way children who have intuited early that the world is uncertain will fasten themselves to their most reliable source of warmth. Dolores was his anchor. She was the fixed point around which his chaos organized itself. His father was something more complicated. Dennis loved his son. There was never any question of that. He came to see him play when he could. He was proud in the way that fathers of remarkable children are proud, that helpless, almost bewildered pride that doesn't quite know what to do with itself. But he was also disappearing. Not physically, not yet, but incrementally, in the way that addiction dismantles a person from the inside, quietly replacing them with something that looks like them but isn't quite, something that has the same face and the same voice but responds to different frequencies, pulls toward different gravity. Cristiano understood this before he had words for it. He understood it the way children always understand the emotional weather of their homes, not analytically but in the body, in the way he read the atmosphere of a room when he walked in the way he learned to adjust his behavior to match whatever version of his father was present. He became, very young, extraordinarily good at reading people, at understanding what a situation required, at performing whatever was needed to keep the peace, to maintain the warmth, to preserve the fragile equilibrium of a family doing its best under difficult conditions. Later, those same skills, reading people, reading rooms, understanding what a moment required, performing under pressure, would make him one of the most complete footballers who ever lived. The body learns. The body never forgets. When he was 12 years old, Sporting CP came calling. The academy scouts had seen him at a youth tournament, and what they had seen had been enough, more than enough, to make the offer. A place at one of Portugal's most prestigious academies. A chance at a professional career. An escape hatch from Quinta do Falcao, from the dampness and the smallness and the particular texture of a childhood spent counting money. The only condition was that he had to leave immediately. He had to cross the water and go to Lisbon and live in the academy dormitory and become, overnight, a boy without a neighborhood, without a street, without the sound of his mother's voice in the next room. He was 12 years old. Dolores Aveiro took him to the airport. She has talked about this moment in interviews, and each time she talks about it, the same thing happens to her face, a kind of tightening, a recollection of pain so specific and so physical that it lives in the muscles even decades later. She has said that she held him at the airport, and she didn't want to let go. She has said that she cried the whole way home. She has said that she prayed every night for a child who was sleeping in a dormitory in Lisbon, 12 years old, far from home, in a world that was going to demand everything he had before it gave him anything back. Cristiano in the dormitory cried too. He has admitted this.
He called home and cried.
He was homesick with a severity that surprised even him. This child who had been so eager, so certain, so electrically convinced that this was his destiny. The reality of being 12 and alone and far from your mother was different from the idea of it. The idea was adventure and glory and becoming. The reality was a narrow bed in a shared room, and the ceiling in the dark and the sound of other boys breathing and a homesickness that felt like a physical illness. Like something had been extracted from his chest and left behind in Funchal. He called his mother. He told her he wanted to come home. And Dolores Aveiro, exhausted, poor, heartbroken, praying every night for her boy, told him to stay. She told him that what he was feeling was real, and she understood it, and she was feeling it too, across the water, in the house that felt too quiet without him. But she told him that going home would be the end of something that hadn't started yet. She told him that greatness had a price, and this loneliness, this cold dormitory, this distance from everyone who loved him, this was the first installment of that price. She said, "Stay." And he stayed. And that decision, made by a 12-year-old boy listening to his mother's voice on a phone in a Lisbon dormitory, set in motion everything that followed. Every goal, every trophy, every record, every night when the stadium rose and the name rang out across tens of thousands of voices. Every moment of the life that was coming. It all led back to that corridor, that phone, that boy choosing to stay. He stayed because his mother told him to. And because his mother told him to, the world got Cristiano Ronaldo. But the distance never fully healed. Not the distance from Madeira, not the distance from his father. Denis Aveiro's illness progressed through the years of his son's rising career like a parallel story, one that the world wasn't watching, one that had no stadium and no cameras, one that measured its milestones in hospital visits and difficult conversations and the particular grief of watching someone you love lose the fight with themselves. Cristiano sent money home from the beginning. Before he was famous, before the endorsements, before the €100 million transfer fees, when he was a teenager at Sporting making his first professional wages, he sent money home because that was what you did when you came from where he came from. You didn't forget where the ground was. You didn't pretend that the people you left behind were less real because you were moving further from them. He called his mother constantly. He flew home whenever he could. He was, in the very specific and important way that matters most, a good son. But being a good son is not the same as being able to fix things. And there are some things that cannot be fixed from the outside. Denis Avero's addiction was one of those things. Cristiano had the resources, eventually, to put his father in treatment. He did this more than once. He would not speak about the details in public, but those close to the family confirmed it, the son trying to save the father, trying to use the only tool available to him, which was money, which was access, which was the ability to pay for help that hadn't existed when he was a child. It didn't work. Not the way he had hoped it would work. And that failure, not his failure, but the failure of the situation, of the disease, of the limits of what can be fixed no matter how much you want to fix it, was something Cristiano carried quietly for years. That knowledge that there are problems money cannot solve. That there are distances even the fastest plane cannot close. That love, on its own, is sometimes not enough. He had scored hundreds of goals by the time his father died. He had won leagues and cups and Champions Leagues and Ballon d'Or awards and individual records that had never been achieved by any human being in the history of the game. He had been worshipped on 5 continents. He had been photographed 10,000 times. He had been the subject of documentaries and biographies and statistical analyses and tribute videos that made grown men cry in their living rooms. And he had not been able to save his father. That was the stone in his chest. That was the thing that sat beneath all the trophies, beneath all the records, beneath all the carefully curated public image of invincibility and perfection and relentless triumph.
The stone.
The thing that could not be lifted by any achievement because it was not that kind of weight. He has called his mother the most important person in his life more times than can be counted. In press conferences, in award ceremonies, in the documentaries where the cameras try to find the man beneath the athlete, in the quietly emotional moments at the end of matches when he looks up at the stands and finds her face among the crowd. Dolores Avero is there for almost every major game of her son's career. She has been there in Madrid and Manchester and Turin and Lisbon, always in the stands, always watching, always the fixed point. She is a small, fierce, intensely devout woman who treats her son's success as confirmation of something she always knew and treats her son's failures as temporary obstacles that will be overcome because she raised him to overcome things. She prays for him before every match. She has said, with complete seriousness, that God gave her Cristiano for a reason and that the goals are part of a divine plan. Whether you believe in the theology or not, there is something moving in the image of this woman, who once worked 6 days a week cleaning offices, who once stood at an airport and let go of her 12-year-old boy because she believed in his future more than she feared her own grief. There is something moving in the image of her in the stands, watching what he became. She has also been ill. Seriously, frightening ill. In 2021, Dolores Avero suffered a stroke and a heart attack, and for a period that lasted longer than anyone wanted to talk about publicly. The outcome was uncertain. Cristiano was, at the time, at Euro 2020 with the Portuguese national team. He learned about his mother's condition and continued playing, because that is what she would have wanted, because she was not a woman who accepted weakness as a reason to stop, and she had raised him to be the same. But the fear was there, a cold, particular fear that lives beneath every other feeling when the person you love most in the world is suddenly, terribly fragile. She recovered. The stroke left its marks, the way strokes do, a slight difference in her movement, a visible reminder of the proximity of loss. But she recovered, and she was back in the stands. And Cristiano scored goals and looked up at the crowd and found her face, and whatever passes between them in those moments is not something that can be written down in any language. But then there was another woman, and another loss. And this one broke something that had not been broken before. Cristiano Ronaldo had been with Georgina Rodriguez for years, a relationship that had begun quietly in a shop in Madrid and had evolved into something that was, by any honest assessment, genuinely loving. Georgina is not a simple person to understand from the outside. She is beautiful in a way that generates instant, reflexive suspicion in people who don't believe beauty and substance can coexist. She is intelligent, ambitious, protective of her family, and deeply, visibly devoted to the man she loves in a way that reads as entirely authentic to anyone paying attention. She had given him a daughter, Alana Martina. She had become a mother to his other children. She had built a life with him through relocations and competitive pressures and the particular loneliness of being the partner of someone the world believes they own a piece of. In the spring of 2022, Georgina was pregnant with twins. They had announced the pregnancy publicly, with the particular joy of a family that has been through difficulty and arrived at something luminous. There were photos. There was happiness that was not performed. You could always tell, the difference between Cristiano's public performances and his private joy. And this was the private kind, the kind that escapes before you can manage it. 2 babies. A family growing. The future taking shape in the most intimate and irreversible of ways. And then one of the twins died. The boy died. At birth, or close enough to birth that the distinction barely matters. He arrived into the world and then he was gone, and in that space of time that was barely time at all, a family gained a daughter and lost a son simultaneously, and the accounting of it is so terrible that the mind flinches away from trying to calculate it. Cristiano and Georgina released a statement. It was short. It was written in the language of people who are in the rawness of grief and are trying to find words and discovering that words are inadequate, that the thing that has happened is beyond the reach of what language was designed to do. They thanked people for their support. They spoke of the joy of their daughter and the pain of their son. They asked for privacy. And then Cristiano Ronaldo, 48 hours later, played a football match. Stop. Stay with that for a moment. 48 hours after the death of his son, he put on the shirt and he went out onto the pitch and he played football. Because that is what the schedule required. Because contracts and commitments and the machinery of professional sport do not pause for grief. Because he is a person who has spent his entire life using the pitch as the place where chaos cannot follow, and perhaps there was something in the ritual of it. The boots, the warm-up, the ball, the noise of the crowd. That was the only thing in that moment that felt familiar, felt controllable, felt like the version of the world he knew how to navigate. Or perhaps he went out there because he didn't know what else to do. Because the alternative was to stay inside with the weight of it, and some weights are so enormous that the only thing you can do is keep moving, because the moment you stop is the moment the full mass of it lands on you, and you don't know if you'll be able to stand back up. He was seen on the pitch that night with an expression that was impossible to describe precisely. Not blank, not the professional mask, not the game face. Something different. Something that lived between the eyes and was visible to anyone looking carefully enough. The expression of a person who is present in body and somewhere else entirely in everything else. He played. The match ended. He went home. And life. Because life is relentless and indifferent and does not adjust its schedule to match the dimensions of your grief. Life continued. The next match came.
And the one after.
And the one after that. He kept going. Because keeping going was what he knew. Because stopping was not something he had ever learned to do. Because somewhere in his childhood, in a dormitory in Lisbon or on a street in Funchal or at an airport watching his mother try not to cry, he had made a decision. Not a conscious decision, but the kind that lives in the body rather than the mind. That forward was the only direction available to him. Forward. Always forward. No matter what was behind. Cristiano Ronaldo is the father of 4 children who are alive, and of 1 boy who is not. He has spoken about his children with a tenderness that consistently surprises people who have constructed a version of him based on the public persona. The peacocking goal celebrations, the carefully posed photographs, the competitive arrogance that is real but is also, for those paying attention, more complex than it appears. When he talks about his children, the architecture changes. The controlled performance relaxes. Something underneath comes through. Cristiano Jr. came first, in 2010, born via surrogate, identity of the biological mother never disclosed, never to be disclosed, a decision that Cristiano has maintained with absolute consistency and zero apology. His son is his son. The details of the son's origins are the son's to know or not know on his own terms, in his own time. This is a position he has held against considerable public pressure, and it says something about him that the thing he is most private and most firm about is not his own image, but the protection of his child. He has raised that boy as his primary parent for years. During his time at Real Madrid, at Juventus, at Manchester United, wherever the career has taken him, Cristiano Jr. has been there. In the footage and the photographs, the boy appears at his father's side with a comfort and ease that tells you everything about what kind of home exists behind the closed door. He is a quiet boy with his father's eyes and something of his father's intensity. He plays football. Of course he plays football, and his father watches him with an expression of fierce, helpless pride that is the same expression, exactly, that Denis Avero once wore watching his own son. The cycle. The unbroken cycle of fathers and sons, and the love that passes between them. Alana Martina, his daughter with Georgina, arrived in November 2017. She has her mother's warmth and her father's energy, and the particular confidence of a child who has been loved completely. And Eva and Matteo, twins born via surrogate in 2017, complete the family picture, a family that has been assembled by love and choice and the stubborn insistence of a man from Madeira who decided, apparently very early, that whatever else the world took from him, he would build this specific, particular, chosen warmth around himself. Because this is what people miss when they reduce Cristiano Ronaldo to statistics and controversies and the pantomime of his public image. He is a man who grew up in a house with love in it that was also complicated, that was also frayed at the edges by difficulty and illness and financial stress, and he has spent his adult life building a house with love in it that is not complicated, that is not frayed, that is clean and warm and safe in the way that his childhood home, which he loved still, could not always be. He is not trying to become something. He is trying to give his children something he received imperfectly. He is trying to complete a sentence that his own father began and couldn't finish. There is a video that circulated a few years ago, not professionally shot, not staged, not part of any promotional campaign. Someone caught it on a phone. In it, Cristiano is on the training pitch with his son, Cristiano Jr., who is maybe 10 or 11. They are working on something, a particular movement, a piece of technique, and the father is demonstrating and the son is trying and the son gets it wrong, and the father demonstrates again, patiently, and the son tries again. And again. And on the third or fourth attempt the boy gets it right, and the way Cristiano reacts, the enormous, unguarded, completely genuine joy on his face, is not the reaction of a man who has just won a Champions League. It is bigger than that. It is the reaction of a person receiving something they didn't know they needed. He watched his father struggle to be present. He decided to be present. That decision, repeated every day, in every small ordinary moment, is probably the most important thing he has ever done. More important than any goal. More important than any record. Because records, in the end, are just numbers. And numbers don't grow up. Numbers don't inherit anything. Numbers don't carry you forward when you are gone. Children do. After his father died, Cristiano played the next match with a black armband around his sleeve. The camera found his face several times during the game.
He scored.
He did not celebrate the way he usually celebrated. He stood for a moment in the space after the ball went in, and then he pointed upward, a gesture that he has made many times, that has been interpreted many ways, but in that particular match on that particular night carried a weight of meaning that required no interpretation. Everyone watching understood. The crowd was respectful in the way that crowds can sometimes be when they understand that sport is not the most important thing happening, that the person on the pitch is also a person who has lost something that cannot be replaced by any number of goals. There was something almost tender in it, tens of thousands of people, collectively understanding that this moment was not theirs. That it belonged to him, that he played the full 90 minutes. He was, objectively, one of the best players on the pitch. And this is the thing about Cristiano Ronaldo that is hardest to explain to people who only see the performance. The performance has always been, at least in part, a coping mechanism. The work is where he goes when the world is too much. The training, the matches, the relentless pursuit of physical excellence. It is not merely ego, not merely ambition. not merely the desire to be the best. It is also escape. It is also control. It is also the thing that a boy from Madeira found when everything else was uncertain, the thing he could make sense when nothing else made sense, the thing that said, "Here, in this white-lined space, you are not helpless. Here, you have power over outcomes. Here, things happen because of what you do, not in spite of it." Grief is the opposite of that. Grief is radically out of control. Grief does not respond to training or preparation or the relentless application of discipline. Grief arrives on its own schedule and it stays as long as it wants, and it does not care how many Ballon d'Or awards you have or how high your vertical jump is or how perfectly you can bend a ball from 30 meters. It does not care about any of that. It has its own rules, and the rules cannot be mastered. For a man who had spent his entire life mastering everything, grief was the most foreign country he had ever visited. He has talked in the years since about what those losses did to him. Not in detail. He is not a man who opens the interior rooms to public view without choosing the door carefully, but in fragments. In moments of slightly lowered guard in interviews. In the things he says about his children that imply what he doesn't say directly. In the way he has spoken about his mother since her stroke, with an urgency, a specificity of love that was always there but has become, since the events of those years, more audible. He has said that he thinks about death now differently than he did when he was young. He has said that when you are young you believe, without examining the belief, that there is always more time, that the people you love will be there tomorrow, that the important conversations can wait because there is no urgency, there is always tomorrow. There is a room in Cristiano Ronaldo's house. This is something he has mentioned, in the way people mention things they are proud of but don't want to seem to be showing off about, where he keeps the trophies.
Not all of them.
The main ones. The Ballon d'Or awards, the Champions League medals, the things that represent the absolute summit of what a career in football can produce. His children are allowed to play with them. Think about that for a moment. Think about what it says. These are objects that the rest of the world treats as sacred, that fans in museum exhibits look at through glass, that journalists photograph with reverence, that represent achievements so singular that there is no frame of reference for most people to place them in. And he lets his children pick them up, hold them, pretend with them, use them as props in whatever game they are inventing in whatever ordinary Tuesday afternoon moment of childhood they are living. He said it simply without apparent awareness that it was profound. He said, "They are just things. The people are not just things. His father was not just a thing. His lost son was not just a thing. His mother is not just a thing. Georgina is not just a thing. Cristiano Jr., who has his eyes, Eva, Matteo, Alana, they are not just things. They are the actual substance of the life. They are what the trophies were bought with, in the currency of absence and sacrifice and the particular price that greatness always charges, which is that you cannot be everywhere, and everywhere you are not. Someone who loves you is learning to manage without you. He has managed a lot. He has been managed around a lot. He has left and arrived and left again, carrying the life in suitcases, rebuilding it in new cities, assembling the warmth in new houses, making sure, as far as one person can make sure of such a thing, that the children always wake up in something that feels like home. His mother came to his last major trophy celebration. She was there, in the crowd, moving with the careful deliberateness of a woman whose body now carries the evidence of what it has been through. She was dressed beautifully. She was surrounded by the family she had built, the daughter, the grandchildren, the son standing across the room with a trophy in his hands and finding her face, always finding her face, the way he has been finding her face since he was a boy looking for the fixed point. She caught his eye. She smiled the way mothers smile when they see their children arrive at something good, that smile that is about the future, about all the time that has passed, about the people who should be here and are not. She smiled the way Dolores Severo smiles, which is with the full knowledge of everything it cost to get to this room, this moment, this smile. He crossed the room to her. He put his arm around her. He said something quiet, close to her ear. She laughed. He kissed the side of her head with the same gentleness he uses when he holds his children. Nobody photographed that moment. It happened in the middle of a celebration that had 100 cameras in it, and somehow that particular 5 seconds went unrecorded.
which is perhaps exactly as it should be.
Which is perhaps the point. The things that matter most have always happened in the spaces between the cameras. In dormitory corridors and hospital rooms and cars pulled over on the side of roads in Italy. In small houses on an island in the Atlantic where a woman is working 6 days a week and a boy is learning that the world is uncertain but that he has something in him that is not. In rooms where fathers and sons hold each other's hands and say things that will never be repeated because they belong only to the two people in the room. In those spaces, in those moments, that is where Cristiano Ronaldo actually lives. That is where the real story is. The thing about losing a father is that you don't stop needing one. You stop having one, which is a different thing. The need doesn't resolve. It just changes shape. It becomes something you carry rather than something you answer. It becomes a presence by absence, the particular shape of the space where someone used to be, a shape that remains visible long after the person is gone, the way a body in snow leaves an impression that stays even after the body has moved away. Cristiano Ronaldo is the most decorated footballer of his generation. He is also a son who lost his father before he had finished learning how to be one. He is a father himself now, for times over, trying to give his children something that he received imperfectly and loves perfectly, trying to translate what he understood about being loved into what he understands about loving. Trying, every day, in the quiet, ordinary moments between the trophies and the records and the noise of the world outside the window, to be present, to be the fixed point, to be the person his children will look for in the crowd. He knows what it means to look for someone in a crowd and find them. He knows what it means to look and not find them. He knows the difference between those two things in his body, in the specific language that only grief can teach. And so he scores his goals and he shatters his records and he trains in the dark before the world wakes up, and he does all of it with the particular ferocity of a man who has been reminded, more than once, by experiences that could not be outrun by any amount of excellence, that time is the one resource that does not replenish, that the people you love are not guaranteed, that tomorrow is a belief, not a certainty, and so he makes sure, today, every today, with the discipline of a man who has made a practice of making sure that the people who matter know it. His mother, his partner, his children. They know it. Every day. They know it. And somewhere, in the particular way that love persists beyond the physical, in the way that children carry their parents long after their parents are gone, the boy who looked up at him with clear, tired, finally honest eyes in a room in Madeira knows it too. Dennis Severo, who gave his son a name, who gave his son a ball, who gave his son, at the very end, whatever it was he said in that room that Cristiano has never told anyone, who gave his son, in the end, himself. The stadium lights will go out one day. The records will stand or fall. The name will remain, on shirts, on plaques, in the statistics of a sport that measures everything it can measure and misses the rest. But here is what will last longest, what will matter most, what the numbers cannot contain. A boy from an island who learned that love is the only thing worth training for. A man who, when the world was watching, played football. And who, when the world was not watching, held the people he loved and refused to let go. That is the real record. The unbreakable one. That is Cristiano Ronaldo.